here with Sean Conway of Micro Farms of Colorado. Is that the full name?
Micro Farms Colorado.
Micro Farms Colorado.
I've been farming under my own farm. This is my 5th season, so kind of mid 5th year right now. My farm is in Arvada and Lakewood, Colorado, which are in the Denver metro area. Here is kind of my main plot where I've got my wash station and cold storage and where all the produce from all my satellite plots comes back to, and it's also the largest plot I have that I'm farming. I've got about 2/3 of an acre in production here, and then I've got 11 other plots around town, just in people's front or backyards, all in Lakewood or Arvada, that I'm also farming. And they range anywhere from 1,500 square feet to 3,000 square feet or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in aggregate, a lot across 11 farms.
It's about an acre and a half
yeah.
in production total.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's
that's no small feat. Like an acre and a half and stitched together across 11 places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just me. I don't have any employees at the moment. I have in the past, but at this point it's just me and my mom, who helps me out a ton, and some other volunteers here and there, but no employees. It's just kind of a little small family farm.
Okay. Yeah. What are the main crops that you grow?
Real mixed variety. I do a lot of greens, I do a lot of herbs, I do a good amount of root crops. I also do tomatoes, cherry and large heirloom tomatoes. I do smaller amounts of like squash and cucumbers and beans and peas. I do cabbage and celery. The cabbage mostly gets made into sauerkraut that we sell as a value-added product. And we do have some fruit production that mostly we make into jam for value-added products as well.
Awesome.
Yeah,
how long have you been doing the value-added?
The sauerkraut, just this past year we started doing that. The jams we've been doing since the beginning, so this is our 5th year doing that as well. And I have some farming experience before this. I worked for a nonprofit that was doing urban farming stuff up in Laramie, Wyoming, as urban as that gets. And I was in the Peace Corps. I was an agricultural volunteer in the Peace Corps, so doing not urban farming, but farming stuff down in Paraguay for a couple years too before that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of, what they say, cut your teeth somewhere else, and then came back and decided, like, I want to keep doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I probably didn't have enough experience or knowledge when I started, but, figuring it out slowly but surely.
How'd you start stitching this land area together?
Yeah, so I didn't own this place when I first started 5 years ago. I was living with my sister, and I started in her yard and my mom's yard. They don't live too far apart from each other. And then just kind of some of their neighbors and friends in the neighborhoods. I started out with 9 yards that first season. And then the next season, I bought this place and started the process of turning it into a working farm, but kind of upped the number of yards that I was farming to, I think I added up to 22 that season.
Wow.
So I was installing a lot more than, or not a lot, but a good amount more than I had installed the year before, but also still farming the ones from the year before. So
you're going all over the place.
Yeah, I was going all over the place. I was pretty overextended, and I did have, a couple employees that year. I was really trying to turn it into something that could really grow and have it be more of like an organization than like just kind of a family farm like it is now. And kind of quickly found out that wasn't really what I wanted it to be, and that it wasn't probably going to work out that way. So the next year, my third year, I pared it down. I got rid of some of the yards that really just weren't productive, or was just kind of not the right situation, too much work. Some of the ones I took on that first year when I was really excited and was kind of taking anything, I let some of those go, and only had one employee that year, and between the two of us, we kind of did everything while still trying to get this place up and running, and built this wash barn, our pack house, and started working on the land down here a little bit to get it ready. And then the next season, I didn't have any employees and was still working on getting this place into production, but had let go of even more yards. And so I've just really been shedding the ones that aren't really working and keeping the ones that produce well and are the right situation, and a little more accessible for me to get in and out of, and the ones that make sense, and that I enjoy going to. So and now that I've got a lot more going on at my own house, I can tailor the crops I plant here to be the ones that need a lot of attention or need kind of constant harvest, or they're really fast in and out of production. So I'll be getting a crop in and then turning over the beds and getting another crop in multiple times through the season. So I'm focused on that here now, and these other yards are really, I've figured out systems to keep them less hands-on and reduce the amount of trips that I need to make out there. I deliver a CSA share to each of my yard partners, is what I call them, the people whose yards that I farm, each week, and they pay for the water and give me the space, and I do pretty much everything else. And when I go to deliver their shares, I just take a day out of the week and I do that, and that's when I check on the gardens and I do the weeding, and if I need to do any harvesting, I just kind of go through each one and do that one day a week and kind of keep up with them that way. And then the rest of the days of the week, for the most part, I'm here unless I need to run out and grab something really fast, or make a special trip to do like a big weeding job or a big planting job or something.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Can I interrupt us and ask if you have a hat or something? I'm like,
yeah, totally.
Spend this whole time like,
yeah, man.
Yeah.
When I first started, I wanted to get all that new land into production and really start growing and selling food like right away, like that first season. So I needed help because I had to do all this installation, but then still had to get the planting done and start weeding while I was still installing some of these production systems in some of the new yards. And so I hired people on to help me with that, and it was, employees are definitely helpful in some situations, but if you don't get somebody who's experienced doing this, and not many people are in like kind of this setting, these kind of urban farms are not the most common way to grow stuff, so it's really hard to find qualified employees, and with the right amount of experience. So I was trying to really train people up at the same time, and it was kind of spreading me really, really thin. And at some point, you got to weigh the benefits of having the extra help, but weighing it against the amount of time it takes for you to train them and check in on them, make sure they're doing stuff right, fix mistakes that happen, which do, make sure you're setting people up for success, but all of that takes you away from doing things that you could probably be more productive than them at. And so getting all of these installed and up and running, I don't think I could have done it in the time frame that I did without help, but it was more exhausting for me than I really wanted it to be, especially long term. Those first couple of years it was okay, but that kind of stress and kind of always having to be on was pretty taxing on me. So eventually I just made the decision that, I wanted to keep things simpler, not really grow, not take on a ton more space than I could personally handle, and just get my systems down really, really well so that one person really could do most of the work. And I don't need this farm to keep growing, and I don't need to keep adding stuff on. I just want to make a living for myself and run my own little business. So that's my goal now, is just keep it small, keep things light, just to make sure I'm still enjoying it too. You add employees in, and it's a lot of added stress. They're helpful, but they're also a liability, especially if you're on other people's property. You gotta withhold taxes, you gotta have workers' comp insurance, it's all these added expenses and investments that maybe you don't really think about when you're starting a farm, but they add up really, really fast, especially if you're not a really, really big operation that started out by taking out a really big loan or a bunch of loans, and to get stuff set up really quickly and hire out contractors to do things. If you're trying to do that all within your small farm organization, and you're the one teaching everybody to do that, and you're the one who's liable for everything, and that's a lot to do. So if you're starting a farm, take into consideration what size farm you're trying to start, and what's an ideal size for you to work on. Like, do you want to end up managing a really big operation and not doing much active farming, or keep it really small and you're the one doing stuff and everything's on you, but you've got a little, few less moving parts, you're less the person who's managing and training people, and more the person who's getting the stuff done. And that's what I wanted for myself. I think for more urban farms, when you're working on a smaller land base, that's probably going to be more the case, that you're going to be the one doing things directly. And if you can keep it to the smaller number of employees, that's less moving parts for you to have to manage. Yeah. So, urban farmers on small land bases are, if you can keep it a one-person operation, if that's, the ideal that you have for your farm, then I think that's the way to go. I think you're more profitable, and it's just a little easier.
You only have to worry about managing the farm, not managing the farm and managing your employees.
Exactly.
Who are working the farm.
Yeah, and there's, just the farm itself, that's so many different things that you're keeping track of.
Little jobs.
But yeah, trying to find people to help you with it is a hard task to do, and then keeping them going and keeping them in the farm. If you get that turnover going, you're training people, then they're leaving, they get a different job or they move or whatever. It's like, it's a lot of investment you just put into that person to not really get a return out of them, if they don't come back the next season. So this is definitely something you got to take into consideration.
Okay.
For me, I was looking for a property that was at least an acre, which is pretty large property for the Denver metro area, but they do exist. There's still a good amount of them around, but it had to be affordable. So that's the hard part, is finding something with so much land that I could actually afford. And in order to do that, it either had to be like a distressed property, or it had to have enough places on the property that I could rent out, outbuildings or basement apartment, or, rooms to have roommates or whatever to help me pay the mortgage, to a point where I could actually sustainably live there and continue to do what I was doing, which wasn't profitable yet. I was still building my farm, and I knew I wanted to do this, but I knew that having that home base was a key part of it too, to making it profitable. And so I was looking for something that had about an acre at least, if not more, had water rights, which is a big deal in Colorado. I was either looking for a well, an agricultural well, or surface water rights, like ditch water. And this place does have ditch water rights. I ended up buying more. It came with like a half or a quarter share, and I bought 3/4 more of a share, so I have a full share, which means I have rights to as much water as I'll ever use on this property. But that was a big investment.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's going to pay off over time. And so I was looking for water rights, a good amount of land, and then, the right property that I could afford. So this one that I found, it's got, an outbuilding that I rent out to people. It's got a basement apartment I rent out. I live with a roommate upstairs. So being able to pay the mortgage that way, just by having a shared living space, is key for me to be farming right now. And it's not something that everybody has the opportunity to do or is kind of as privileged as me. I started out with good credit, and I'd saved up a good amount of money in the past to kind of invest in this business. So, and I bought it at the right time in Colorado, that prices hadn't gone too crazy yet. And the interest rates were still really low. So it kind of all worked out for me to get this place. So if you can find that situation, and it's what you want to do, then you should jump on it. It's a little hard now just because the past couple years, property values pretty much everywhere, I think, have kind of skyrocketed, but especially here in the Denver metro area.
When did you buy this?
I bought this in, what year was it? See, this is my 4th year here, so it's like 2015.
Okay.
Very end of 2015, I think, is when I bought this. Yeah.
Kind of like after that first bubble popped recession from 08, 09.
Yeah.
Things had recovered a bit, but they haven't. We're not on this probably new bubble.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we weren't quite at the top. It was going up for sure, but it wasn't at what it is now, which who knows how long it'll stay there. But yeah, it was not. Now I'm sure I couldn't afford this place, even if I rented out, my bathroom. So. I got water storage and filtration, and the high tunnel through an NRCS grant, and then some money to plant cover crops, very small amount that doesn't actually cover the seed and stuff. But when you apply, the more of those like line items that they have that you can do on your farm, the more likely you'll be to be accepted. So adding in, this and this and this cover crop conservation, this this water meter, all that stuff kind of makes you a more attractive candidate to get the grant. And I just worked with my local NRCS agent. It's run through the counties, so I'm in Jefferson County in Colorado. So I, just worked with the Jeffco agent, and she came out. She was super helpful. Helped me, figure out what I could do, navigate the grant, give me the paperwork to sign, help me try to find the things that I would need to buy to complete the grant. And how it worked was, I applied, then within a year I knew that I had gotten the grant. It doesn't move very, very quick, but it is a big help financially when you get something like that. So it is worth the wait if you can wait. But I found out I got the grant and then started, buying the stuff and installing it. And once I bought it, I tried to install it as quickly as I could, for the most part. because you don't really get that payment until the agent comes back and has seen that you completed it and it's all done, and then you have to sign more paperwork. They put it in, and then you wait, a little longer, and then you get those funds back. So you have to have some working capital.
Yeah, you're cleared for it, but you still fronted the cash to put it in, and then after they verify that you installed what they said that they'll pay for you to install, then they rebate it to you.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's not like you save a receipt and you're like, all right, this is what I paid. This is how much the high tunnel kit I bought cost. Here you go. It's like they're like, you buy whatever high tunnel you want. We're gonna give you this much per square foot of high tunnel you buy, and we're estimating you're gonna get this size high tunnel. So, I could have gotten a bigger one, and gotten paid still whatever they told me they were gonna pay me per square foot, of what they estimated. If I got a larger one, they wouldn't have paid extra. Or if I got all the bells and whistles, they're not going to chip in for that. It's just they have a set rate per square foot, and they tell you, you work with the agent and you fill in about the size that you're going to get, and you got to stick with that, or else you're not going to get paid back for the extra stuff you put in there or anything. So it's definitely an interesting experience, and it's definitely slow. I mean, it's definitely like a government-run program, but it's also just incredibly, I couldn't afford a high tunnel. It would have taken me a lot longer to be able to afford the infrastructure for my irrigation to get all of this into production. That just would have been, behind
the whole farm, everything down.
Yeah, and that, that's tough, because you wanna take up space in whatever market you're at. You wanna have a really good offering for your CSA, so you wanna be producing a lot of stuff. Like, if your biggest issue is going out and selling all of this stuff, then that's a great problem to have. It's when you're like showing up to the market and you don't have a full table that you're like, oh man, this is not going very well, and everybody can see that, and nobody wants to buy from you. And so, the quicker you can get everything established, the better off you'll be. The quicker you learn those production practices to get your stuff looking really nice and get your soil in order and healthy and productive, the quicker you're going to gain those customers, and the more loyal to you they're going to be, because they like your stuff. And in this space, a lot of it's about quality for your customers. So bringing that, like, the quantities and the qualities should definitely be your goal with whatever land you're working on. And I've taken to even telling people, if it's possible to get your farm set up, and I know other farmers who do this, or espouse this idea too, get your farm set up, take a year or even two, and don't produce any food yet. Get some growing experience before you do this. Intern on a farm, or be a farmhand, or enter a farmer incubator program, or just be a gardener, but really try to learn your stuff for production. But then build your farm, and don't try to be selling stuff that first year when you're getting everything set up, and then jump in just full steam and market yourself and be growing really, really nice stuff from the beginning. If you can do that, it's so much less stressful than trying to establish a farm and growing and selling and doing everything all at once. That's a hard way to go, and it draws things out, and it can make it harder to find those customers, because if you start out with a bad offering, you build a reputation for that. Yeah. So that's a hard thing to overcome.
And so instead, just kind of keeping like your hand close to or just playing it close until you break into the market, and then just hit it.
Go
big,
for it. Yeah, exactly.
That way you don't have that kind of half-filled table.
Yeah.
And you're just there with, I've got everything. I've got the diversity. I've got the high stacks. And
yeah. Okay. Got my booth all figured out and everything looks good.
There's signage on everything.
Yeah,
I've got
exactly.
Like a little placard for my farm or whatever.
Yeah, and you're not scrambling to harvest whatever you do have growing because you were busy, you know, installing this irrigation system till 9 o'clock last night. And so these are all things that I've done and don't recommend. So I have a small CSA that I keep going to get, you know, produce or some funds to start the season with, buy seeds, buy all this stuff, you know, to really get stuff going. Gas for my, you know, walk behind tractor, stuff like that. And so I got the small CSA. I've got Go Farm, which is a local nonprofit that's based in Golden, Colorado, that has a local food share, and then they do some community assistance, food access stuff too. And so they buy my produce like wholesale for their local food share. So I sell a good amount to them wholesale. And then I do the farmer's market. I just do one farmer's market Saturday mornings each week. And I've got a handful of restaurants that buy from me, that I may be moving away from the restaurant side of things and focusing more on just trying to maximize my farmer's market income and you know, trying to build a nice CSA and then getting more in with Go Farm, selling more through them. It's just a little less work than the restaurant, and I get the same price from both of those. So they'll buy in a little bigger quantity, and it's just a little easier to work with them. Their ordering is cleaner and there's less bits and pieces to manage than with the restaurants, which are kind of all over the place. So yeah, working with chefs is always a little tricky. But some farmers do it, and that's their main income.
Like, in what way? What would you say were kind of some of the things that have come to turn you off of restaurants a little bit?
It's a really high turnover industry. So high turnover in the sense that restaurants themselves go in and out of business all the time, and it's a lot of work to establish that connection and get them, you know, buying the produce from you in the first place. And also the chef turnover is, you know, even if a restaurant is still there and it's the chef that's doing the buying, you know, you establish a relationship with that chef. How, you know, if he gets fired or moves or whatever, which happens all the time, the new chef comes in, you got to do all that work all over again. They don't necessarily just pass on their producers to the next chef. Occasionally that happens, but you know, that chef might come in with their own set of producers from the last job that they had, or they might have a totally different style and aren't interested in local produce as much or whatever. So it's harder to build and maintain those relationships and those connections. I just can't rely on it from season to season like I can. You know, CSA shares, I generally can sell about the same amount from year to year. They may be different people, but I'm selling about the same numbers. Or Go Farm is like, you know, nonprofit that's been buying from me since I started my farm, and I can count on them. And yeah, thanks for doing some weeding.
Yeah, try and do something.
Yeah, these beds were pretty hard to establish this spring. I think because of the cold soil temperatures. These were like the first ones that I planted. But man, I seeded this arugula like 3 times to get it to come up, and it's just been growing so slowly. You know, this is the first time I've harvested it this season, and I planted it like the end of April, so pretty slow going. And then my romaine beds didn't germinate very well, but the red lettuce did good for some reason.
Yeah, it looks super nice.
Thank you.
For sure.
Where were we?
You were talking about basically like, I was kind of getting the impression like restaurants kind of similar to the employees. Like it takes a lot of investment on your part for kind of a not guarantee that they're going to come back.
Yeah, I think like if a farm wants to work with restaurants, which there's great things about restaurants too, you know, it's exciting when a chef like loves your stuff and you get to go there and like
See
everybody
it, like, on a
can get it. Yeah, it's just like, and they do such amazing things with it, and those relationships can be great. You know, they can request that you grow stuff and cool stuff that you couldn't really sell at the farmers market or whatever. You know, there can be some really cool things about working with restaurants, but you know, there's a lot of drawbacks to it too. So for me, those are just kind of outweighing those benefits right now. There's nobody telling you what to do. Like you're the one, you tell yourself what to do, and you got to know what to do in each individual situation. And there's a lot of variables to know, and that's where just experience comes in. Really, you know, there's so many variables that, you know, you need to have that experience to help you through it. And you're going to learn a lot in the first few years of starting your farm and continually, but those first couple of years it's a real sharp learning curve. And as much, you know, farm hand stuff that you can do before that, the better off you're going to be. Or you know, if you take a business class, take a marketing class, take all that stuff is going to come into play when you're starting your farm, because it is a business. You know, you got to run it like a business. You've got to be profitable if you want it to be sustainable. If you're not a nonprofit farm or not for profit, when you're running on grants maybe, which is a way that some people go about it, but not what I wanted to do. But yeah, having that experience coming into it made a big difference, but it wasn't enough, honestly. The experience that I had coming into it, I wasn't there yet. And I was just kind of lucky that I had the support system that I did, and some room to make mistakes, and having the people whose yards I was farming, you know, a lot of them were very understanding about that, and you know, because some stuff didn't work out, and it still doesn't, but it's much less now, and I know what to do for the most part to fix things when they are going wrong, or, you know, I can manage my schedule a little bit better, to keep on top of stuff, and but yeah, it's I forgot what question you asked at this point.
About like employee versus being a manager.
Oh yeah. You know, it's just having to do everything and understand the mechanics of the business. It's the record keeping, you know, for the production, but not only that, for the finances, knowing the taxes. You know, taxes are a little different for farmers than just a normal person, or probably whatever job you were doing before you came into this, or you know, learning about sales tax for the city that you're selling in, all the cities that you're selling in. You know, that's something that I had no idea about before I got into this, and had to learn the hard way by, like, you know, searching on government websites for information, and hearing little bits and pieces from other farmers that I had then had to put together and go research on my own. You don't have to do that if you're just a farm hand. You don't have to worry about that. You're the one who gets told, do this, do it this way. Yeah. And you know, then you go do it. And that's the end of your day.
You
Yeah.
at the end of the row and you go home, and
exactly.
You're not worrying about it.
Yeah, and you're not the one who's fretting over, you know, if you took out loans to start the farm, paying those, or paying the next payroll. That's pretty stressful stuff in farming, and it's not guaranteed that you're gonna make it to the next payroll cycle. And knowing all the rules too. There's a lot of rules that you have to follow when you own a farm, that you have to make the workers on your farm aware of. But you've got to know them yourself, and you've got to teach yourself that. And it's a lot of self-teaching and just trying to stay on top of things so that you don't end up in a really bad situation where everything is falling through the cracks and everything is kind of falling apart, because that can definitely happen. So I don't know, it's a totally different experience owning your own farm, and your heart's in it more too. Like it is you.
Yeah.
You are this farm, and you want it to succeed, and you care what your produce looks like and tastes like. And if your snap peas are not as sweet as you want them to be, it's hard. It's hard on you. Yeah, you're not happy about it. And then you try to figure out, what's going on. Is it the variety, or how do I fix this? How do I get what I want this to be? And if you're a worker, it's, that somebody else is telling you how they want it to be, and that's fine. You're going to learn a lot from that person probably in the experiences in that farm. But for me, it's more fulfilling to own my own farm for sure than to just work on a farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different for sure.
Yeah.
It's always a mixed bag. That's something I've definitely found out, is it's like you could try your hardest to not have any impact, but you're going to. Your existence is an impact, and eventually, if you want to keep eating and living in the community that you're living in, it's just being a person, you're impacting the ecosystem, the environment overall, everything, the community, and so, I try to find ways to make less of an environmental impact, a negative environmental impact when I can, but it's not always possible, at least with the resources that I have access to. But it's always an interesting line to walk between, this is going to make me much more efficient, and it's also pretty bad for the environment, or whatever, or not as good as something else that I could do. But you gotta weigh that balance yourself. And the idea behind my business, using people's lawns who were just irrigating them to grow grass that got mowed every week to produce food instead with about the same amount of water. I think that in and of itself is just a better use of land and resources. So, that's one way I sleep at night, is just knowing the fact that I'm doing this is making a small impact that way. Obviously I'm not farming everybody's lawn in the city, but hopefully more people will start to do this, and maybe a lot of lawns will be farmed in the future. And more food will be grown, in the communities that consume that food, and there'll just be a less net environmental impact that way. I do drive around in my truck a lot. I drive from yard to yard, several times a week, and I use gas. I have a walk-behind tractor that uses gasoline, and it does take water to grow this stuff. It's not just a completely fallow field that's relying on rainwater that has all, native species. That's also not incredibly realistic in the space that was set up by previous generations here. You know, if we tore down all these homes, threw all of them all in the dump or wherever they would go, and just let nature take this place back over, well, number one, all these people would have to go somewhere, so where would they go? But it's not going to be like it was ever. You know, there's all these non-native species introduced, and the things that people have done, the way it's set up, is going to impact it forever, really. So, you know, I figure if people are going to live here, I'm going to live here. We have this community. We can try to just keep it as little impact as we can and do the best we can. But I try not to beat myself up over driving my truck around when I have to haul around loads of compost and things like that.
I mean, you're still using a lot less fuel than most any other farm. You know, if they've got several tractors, and just like you've got just a couple of engines, not that big.
And their food gets shipped maybe halfway across the country,
put on a truck
or whatever. And kept cold that whole time, and you know, goes into a big warehouse that takes a lot of resources to run. So. You're going to use resources farming, and that's what it takes. You know, unless every human in the world went back to being a hunter-gatherer, that's what we got now. There's no turning back. So let's try to be smart about it. But you know, you got to use resources to stay alive if you want to.
What have you noticed about like some of the transportation? Like, so you got a CSA pickup coming to you, so you have to connect your farms, but then you don't. Well, other than your market, the Saturday market, you're not like delivering it to them, so they're picking it up from you. And
I don't deliver to the CSA shares. I did one season, and it was too much work, so I was like, I'm never doing that again.
Y'all are coming to me.
I was delivering in like the middle of the night, like just one day a week. I wouldn't get any sleep, and it was awful. So I was like, you guys, you come here, I'll be weeding, and I'll be getting stuff done, and you come and you pick it up. Well, you see the farm that way. We're more connected because it's not just like this food that appears on your doorstep. That's why most people join a CSA, because they want to be part of something. You know. So
have you noticed things about that, like people being just talking about? I mean, I even heard you with this. So far, only one customer so far, but you know, they got to like ask you what you were doing, and like, oh, what's in the tunnel over there? And
they get to see it. They get to see like what the realities of growing food in an urban environment looks like, or just food in general, and that connects them with the dinner that they're going to eat later today. And they know that my hands, whether they like it or not, we're all over that food, and but they trust me. You know, it's a trust between the two of us. You know, they trust me to do that for them, and I'm happy to do it. And I trust them to come over and, you know, get to know me and come to my house and, you know, be a part of what I'm doing. And it's a nice thing that is, people have less and less of connections like that these days. And I think people, to a certain extent, some people are missing that, and really appreciate it. It's an added value to just doing this, more so than just selling the produce.
Are you certified organic? Do you feel a pressure from your customers wanting it?
So I'm not certified organic. I think for me, it doesn't make sense. The cost of it, the paperwork that I'd have to do, I certainly could be. I don't spray any chemicals. I don't use pesticides of any sort. I don't use herbicides of any sort. I don't use chemical fertilizers. You know, I know in general the organic practices to follow to be certified, and I do in my pack house and everything. But you know, I probably don't have my record keeping up to what they would require for the most part. But you know, people trust me because they do see how I'm doing it, and you know, if people have concerns, I can just tell them.
You can take them out and
come
trust
out
them, right?
Yeah.
All right, what are you worried about? This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, a chef can come and you know, come here, pick up produce one week and do stuff. The CSA knows Go Farm, the place that I'm selling to, the nonprofit that has the local food share, do a really good job of telling people about the farmers that they get their food from. Cool. And connecting us that way. And occasionally I'll go to like a distribution day for them and just meet people, you know, talk to them a little bit.
Yeah.
And, you know, so there's at the farmer's market, you know, people can know, like, I farm 5 miles away from here, and all this stuff, you know, I'm accountable to you because you know who I am and you know where to find me on Saturday mornings.
That's a very, very strong thing to be able to say. Like, I'm down the road that way. Like, if you want right now, you know, buy your stuff and you can roll down and see it.
Yeah, and I've never had anybody be like, "Oh, you're not certified organic. I'm not buying this," or I don't want to work with you. That's just never happened. At the farmers market, some people ask us, "Are you certified?" And I say no, but you know, this is how we produce the food. We don't do this. We do this, and that's good enough for people. And I'm happy to do it. I am that organic certification label in that. Yeah. You know, and it's probably better than that.
Yeah, I think that's a very valuable thing that's kind of overlooked sometimes, is when you are small enough, you're able to have that relationship. And yeah, no one's having to externalize this validation to someone else because you're faceless and never seen. Like, you know, you're there talking to people and meeting them. They can come see your farm.
And honestly, even if you do use some non-organic practices, if you do spray for a pest on something or whatever, if people ask you, you know, you should be upfront with them and be accountable to them and be like, but this is, you know, why I did it, and
listen,
this is what it does.
Flea beetles because holy, like I had to.
I don't, and I'm sure they can tell, but but yeah, if they're like, oh, there's no bug damage on this, did you spray? Like, if you are a farmer who did, you know, that's your opportunity to be like, this is my reality. Yep. This is why I do this, and you know, I hope you still buy from me, you know, or whatever, and then they get more information that way.
Yeah, it's part of that trust, is just like, you're just being responsible about it. Like, you're not just applying things willy-nilly or haphazard, or, you know,
right.
Like, there's a reason. Like, I'm trying not to, and sometimes maybe a pressure gets too great and like this had to happen, or maybe, you know, like, I don't spray my crops, but I don't want that thistle coming in, and so like as it hits my fence line, you know, like maybe blast it once a year to make sure that stays away.
Right. Yeah.
But you're able to communicate to them.
Yeah.
You're right. It's not, you know, it's more than organic in that there's more nuance there. It's not just, okay, now it's organic, which means, you know, inputs and, you know, certain inputs didn't happen, certain inputs did happen. It's like, no, it's more than that. Like, this is a unique situation. And
the average customer can't stay up on what is allowed by the Organic Certification Board, because it changes, you know, year to year, and they know that this symbol stands for something, but almost nobody knows everything that it stands for. Like, what are these practices? And there's some that I'm like, that's certified organic, all right. And then there's some that I'm like,
arsenic is, I'm pretty sure arsenic is a safe thing. I mean, not safe, but like,
there's all sorts of interesting stuff. And whoever's making those policy decisions has the say in that, and those aren't necessarily farmers. They're not even necessarily scientists.
Not small farmers.
They're, for the most part, politicians, which can get it right, and they can definitely get it wrong. So, you know, just if people know you, that's much better. That makes more of a difference to them. And unless you're selling to Whole Foods, where nobody's going to know you, you don't have to worry about getting certified organic. You just be honest with people. It is, unless you count the rental stuff to pay mortgage, which on my taxes it does, but but it's my only job.
It's your only job,
Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's Yeah, that's super awesome. It's not that common.
Yeah.
But it's probably very fulfilling, and like it just lets you actually put everything into this farm and not be worried about squeezing it in on the off times, because you have to go to your real job
Right.
to actually cover all these costs so that you can do this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like people doing it as a part-time thing or a side gig, or maybe they think of it as their main thing but they do have another source of income, I think it's totally fine.
Yeah.
And some people can really make that work. But yeah, if you're paying, so much from your other farm so that you can, or from your other job so that you can farm, I don't know, it's probably not going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, that you're able to pay yourself from doing this farm.
Yeah.
And you're not subsidizing yourself in some manner.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are, maybe they have a spouse who has a good, well-paying job and they love to do this and they can make maybe a little bit of money. It might not be enough to support themselves, but they get to do something they love and make a little bit of money, and they find that more valuable than getting whatever job they would if they weren't doing this. So I mean, there's definitely like life situations that lend themselves to people being an urban farmer, and even if it's not like, this is my full-time thing and I'm growing stuff day in, day out for 40 years, that's not necessarily what it has to be. And it can still totally be a fulfilling, worthwhile financially thing to do.
Yeah. Not knocking having other jobs. It just typically it's like there's the striving towards people are working other jobs trying to transition into supporting themselves from their farm so that they can stop having the other job.
Yeah.
And so that's just exciting to hear that,
you've
made it.
Some people doing it. Yeah. It is hard though. There's so much. There's only so many mistakes you can make before that dream kind of sails, and hopefully you make it through all those mistakes and are still in it when that happens. I think a really big hurdle right now is the lack of viable ways to sell your stuff that aren't really time intensive, that give you a fair price for your product. I think like at least here in this area, we don't have like a food co-op or anything I can sell to or be a part of, join and sell my stuff that way, which would, that would be very consistent sales for me. It'd be easy delivery, it'd be something I could probably count on. There'd be other people invested in this with me so that we could all prop each other up, basically. When stuff didn't go good for me, it would go good for somebody else and vice versa. Some communities have that. This one that I'm in doesn't. Hopefully that changes in the future. Farmers markets are awesome, but they're also not the be-all, end-all of selling your produce. I don't think, not everybody in the community is going to come out to a farmer's market or can. I think there's a lot of issues with like accessibility of farmers markets for all types of people in the population. There's the issue that you got to be there too, which is good, and I think farmers markets are an important thing, but you're kind of missing a good way to sell to the public if you have a small scale farm and aren't producing a huge quantity that you can sell to a big grocery store. We're missing that outlet for people who are farming on my size scale to move that product wholesale. And really sell everything that you're producing in an efficient way that gets you a fair price for it. So, this nonprofit that I sell to based in Golden that has a local food share is kind of the closest that I have to something like that. But it'd still be much nicer if, there was some sort of co-op situation or local food hub that people knew that's where you go to get your high quality produce in the community. You go there, maybe a stall type market or something like that, like a more European or in South American model, the way that most people in the world buy their food.
Yeah, something not supermarket.
Yeah, because that's just very low price for us. Very high volume that I really can't reach for the most part on my scale. And there's got to be some sort of intermediate thing that's between farmer's market and grocery store that doesn't exist right now, where I am at least.
Somehow, something still direct to consumer, but not you delivering boxes late into the night, into the early morning.
Exactly, yeah.
Some kind of middle ground there.
Yeah, that's very accessible for the consumer.
What's been your experience with some of the smaller scale tools that are supposed to alleviate labor on the small farm?
I've found some of them work really well, and some of them kind of work, and then some are sort of work, but are not worth it.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's definitely a mixed bag, and there's I'm excited that people are starting to make tools for small farmers again.
Definitely, yeah.
And that's, I think, an area that a lot of innovation can happen, and it could be a really big market for somebody who figures that stuff out.
Yeah, I like that you say again, because
Yeah.
It used to be small tools, then it wasn't for a long time, and you're right. Again,
Right.
we're starting to see that again.
But since then, technology has just come so far that the tools we can make now would be crazy compared to the ones we had 100 years ago for a small farm.
A wooden hoe.
Yeah, exactly. Which I do still love my stirrup hoe.
Yeah.
There's some tools that they had back then that are still great and very useful. But there's a big lack of innovation, I think, that's maybe starting to change. There's a couple players entering that market, but I think that's an area that hopefully some people really step into, and we get really good tools for small, not big tractor run farms like what I have. And things that work in a more urban setting. They're more transportable and smaller, lighter, things like that. So I think specifically, I'll start out with a tool that I think is great, that every small farmer should own, and that's the Jang seeder. That thing is awesome. That's that it does what it's supposed to do every single time. If it doesn't, it's because I did something wrong.
Okay, yeah.
It's never broken on me. It's expensive, but totally worth it. It saves me a ton of time.
Yeah. If you're out here hand seeding, you're gardening. You can't.
You can't do this. You can't do this.
You cannot plant enough crops.
Yeah, unless you're a farm that transplants everything, and that's because of the crops that you grow. Get a Jang seeder. That's a worthwhile investment. I started out with the Earthway seeder, like a lot of farms do, which is less expensive, not nearly as good, works okay, but the Jang was just miles ahead of the Earthway seeder.
Cool.
I'd say just invest in one of those right off the bat. I've gotten the greens harvester that Farmer's Friend makes.
Quick cut greens harvester.
Yeah, quick cut greens harvester. Have found it to be okay. It works well on first cuts of some things. This red leaf lettuce, it works pretty good on a first cut of that. But second cuts, it works a little worse, and third cuts, it works a little worse. It doesn't work well on arugula for me, I've found. Spinach doesn't work.
Hmm.
Other types of lettuce, it works okay. But in general, I found it's kind of expensive. It's pretty dangerous. It's got a blade, very sharp blade on it that a lot of times, you know, you end up having to pull it towards your feet, towards your legs, and I don't like it.
To get it to cut, because I know
they
always show you kind of like side sweeping.
Yeah, and that's just not realistic all the time, and it's also not comfortable. It's not really saving your back. I love the idea of it, and a tool that can do something that does what it's supposed to do. That actually doesn't make you bend over, that gives you a good cut every time, that works on a variety of different kinds of greens. I think it's definitely possible. I just think that tool's not there yet.
Okay.
I wouldn't invest in it unless maybe you have a specific planting plan where like you're a heavy lettuce producer, but you mostly sell the first cuts of things, and then you turn it over, you get a different thing in there. But, you know, if you're a small farm, you're trying to harvest that lettuce for as long as the quality is there for it. And that, you know, normally for me means, you know, 4 cuts at least on a bed. And you're also probably doing more mixed variety of things, you know, different kinds of vegetables, so you can have a good offering at the farmer's market or for your CSA. You're not specifically just a greens farm, and in that case, I don't think that it's worth the money that it costs. You know, if you get good at hand harvesting, you can really burn through a bed doing it. And I would invest more in spending your time getting good at that.
Just perfecting a technique.
Yeah, and that's just me though. Or, you know, a lot of people have started for their cut leaf lettuce, only planting like Salanova lettuce or even head lettuce that they harvest by hand, but they do, you know, frequently, and they let the head regenerate. And the Salanova, that's a kind of seed from Johnny's. It's like a Johnny's original seed that they bred specifically to, in general, be either head or cut leaf, and it works for both, and it's easy to harvest and compact. And a lot of farmers I've seen are switching over to that specific kind of seed, which comes in all sorts of varieties, but it's branded Salanova, and just hand harvesting. The quick greens cutter doesn't really work super well on that stuff either, because it is an actual head that's more compact. That it's harder. It's just hard to get that thing under there.
One strong cut rather than this kind of reciprocating
exactly
thing.
Yeah, and the quality that harvester gives me is just not as good as what I can do by hand. It makes the greens a little dirtier as you're harvesting them because it pulls some up by the roots. It'll spin a lot of them out of the basket, so you get some wastage there. The cut is not as nice or as clean as I can get by hand, so the plant doesn't regenerate as evenly, which is one of the reasons why it's harder to do that second cut. Because, you know, your first cut wasn't super even, and it's going to rip some of those plants out, and there's holes now in your bed, and so just going through and doing it by hand for me is the way to go. I'd love to see something I can just push right down my bed and I stay standing up and it works. And
that seems like the next step, like putting that thing onto some wheels so that you can just kind of like a really old lawnmower, you know, the one you and it's got the blades that go, something kind of like that you just walk it down your row.
But it does need to have, like, you know, you need to be able to finesse it and get different elevations and change how it's cutting, because there's you know, not all of your beds that you plant are going to be 100% perfect. And there's going to be little dips and bumps and maybe a rock, things like that. You got to avoid this drip tape that's popping up right here or whatever. So, you know, it's definitely possible, but there's a reason somebody hasn't done it yet, because it's pretty hard. But I think it can be figured out. Just hasn't happened yet. So that's one I might be worth getting for your farm, but for me, I found it wasn't. Something that I personally have learned was a bad investment for me was my paper pot transplanter. That I think gets a lot of good press, but I don't think it lives up to it. I've found the biggest issue I have with it is when it does actually plant the things in the ground, which doesn't always happen, but when it does, the actual chain doesn't degrade fast enough, and it stops the root from going out as fast.
Like chokes it a bit because it's in that cell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's almost like root bound a bit the entire time, which is not what you want. Like the whole point of transplanting it out is to
exactly. Yeah. Or let's say use it for something like beets or something, which it should work for. It's going to constrict that beet
and make it look all goofy
and make it look weird. Yeah. And I've found that's the case. I get poor quality crops if I use that, and it does actually work. The other problem with it is a lot of times it just doesn't work. It just, you pull it and your paper pot chain, rips, and you got to go back and redo it. And then when it ripped, it popped it out of the soil. You bury it by hand, and then you get it set up again, and you start pulling it, and then the chain gets a little too tight, and it's not falling in the furrow, and the furrow's getting closed before the chain goes in, so you just have a chain of plants on top of the ground,
strung out along the top.
Yeah, and you go back and you bury it by hand, and that mixed with the lower quality of crop you get out of it, for me isn't worth the time you save, if you save any time. If it's deciding to, if your soil conditions are just perfect for it to work pretty well that day, it's still not really worth it for me. I wouldn't recommend spending the $1,000 on it.
Yeah.
Those chains are also not certified organic.
No, they are not. Which
is an issue too.
Fungicide in the paper.
Oh, okay. I thought it was because of the glue that they used, but I have I don't know why.
Maybe it's both. I remember hearing something about a fungicide, and it was like, it's to make sure that the paper doesn't degrade, like before you use it.
Before you use it, yeah.
But then you're introducing like some kind, like a pesticide of sorts, or maybe it's the glue or something. Yeah, because that counts as an input. That's something that you're putting into your soil. Yeah,
that you can't take back out.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know. There's just issues with it, and I don't think it's worth it. What are really good though are like the paper pot trays that you buy with the planter, because it needs its own special trays that fit those chains. But they're awesome. They're like really sturdy, and they're just thicker. They work real well. So get those trays.
Get the paper pot trays.
Yeah, okay. But don't get the paper pot transplanter, and don't even use the chains. You can get a paper pot tray, get the drop seeder that comes with it. It works well too. That thing's awesome.
Cool, yeah. I haven't used it, but like you said, good press. Like that's definitely one of the things I've seen. Just like little things in it, boom.
Yeah,
and now you just seeded 128 plugs.
Exactly. Yeah, and you could use a vacuum seeder for that or whatever. But this thing there's nothing that you don't need electricity, you don't need a vacuum running. It's just like this thing, and it works really well. So get the trays, and then drag the tray along and hand transplant your stuff. That's what I've been doing. The Johnny's nowadays is selling just like a tool that goes through and it makes the furrow for you. It's basically just like one of those pointed little hose for the most part, but then it's got like on the other side of it a little furrow closer. So like you can go through it basically by hand, do what the paper pot transplanter does, and just drag that tool through the ground and just make a furrow, and then you drag your chain out by hand. And I've done this too without this tool, just with a hoe. And then you drag that the other side that closes the furrow over it, and it'll close back up your furrow over your, and you can control it a little more because you're kind of doing stuff by hand. But so that's the thing. But then you're still using the chains, and I've just taken to starting stuff in those trays, popping them out and sticking them in the ground by hand, and doing it kind of the old-fashioned way, and it still works as good as it ever did, and better than that paper trap pot transplanter.
I mean, if the paper pot's faster, that's one thing, but you can get pretty quick at hand transplanting, like soil knife in one hand and tray of plugs in the other, and just popping them in and going.
Yeah.
And especially if you have to keep messing with the paper pot, that takes away the whole point of doing it.
It does, yeah.
I'm trying to mechanize this. I'm trying to not have to touch every plant, and if I still have to, then why do I have this $1,000 piece of sheet metal?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I do know, like, one farmer I know, he dips his paper pot trays into like a bath of fungal inoculant, basically, in like water. And he says that makes those paper pot chains break down faster. So, there are people trying to figure out how to use this piece of equipment, and, they're making some headway on it, but to me it just doesn't seem like the piece, that's doing it. I think there's probably going to be a better way eventually, hopefully, that makes that efficient and works.
I mean, I can understand the drive for it, because I've used those, sitting on the back of a tractor with an automatic transplanter, and you and two other people are just throwing in these plugs as fast as you can, and you're transplanting an innumerable amount of plants, and I can see wanting that on the small scale, like you said, this new surgeons like trying to find small tools, and cost of innovation, like, it doesn't always work.
Right, exactly.
But glad to see that's going somewhere.
Yeah, I'm glad to see people are trying and interested in solving these problems, because definitely, like, having that technology and those new tools will make a huge difference in just, like, number one, how much this stuff costs. Like, if I'm spending less time, I can produce more and I can sell my stuff for less. But it's also just that'll increase the quality of my life and how long I can do this also. So I'm all for the innovations in the small tool world. I just hope we really get some stuff that works like the Jang does. Another piece of equipment that I've found to be a really good investment is my walk-behind tractor. I have a Grillo. You're probably either going to have a Grillo or a BCS. And mine's a Grillo, but it's got a PTO, so you can put all these different implements on it. I've got a power harrow. I've got a tiller. I'd love to get more, but I got to save up some more money. But that thing has just made my farm really, really efficient. And the power harrow has made it lower tillage for me.
Because you're able to get, like, that nice till without a full tilling.
Yeah, without a full, and I'm not inverting soil layers and structure.
Yeah, you're just kind of
I'm able to get that nice seed bed. And like, like no-till is a great idea, and like I'm all for it, and clearly like the soil structure and microbial life, like that's really what is best for your soil, but it's also not realistic in all circumstances. And if you try to go no-till, chances are you'll end up tilling your beds anyway in one way or another. You're just going to do it by hand with a shovel or a broad fork, and then have to go in and break up all those clods and then make it even finer and then rake. You've still tilled
busted
it.
all the aggregates. You've still inverted it to a degree. You've still oxidized a whole bunch of the soil. It's
still tilling whether you're using a tiller or not. So if you're going to make a nice seed bed to direct seed a crop into, especially if you got clay soil like I do, like you got to do some tillage, and keeping that to a minimal as possible is better. But just broad fork once a season and power harrow besides that, and you'd only have to go as deep as you need to go to run your seeder or do your transplants efficiently. And and that's what I've found is the way to go. That walk behind tractor has been a lifesaver for me, for sure. I couldn't manage an acre and a half with just, one person with volunteer help here and there. Without that, it's just not possible. So those are kind of I think the main tools that exist for small farming. The broad fork is another one that I'd say, like, every farm should have a broad fork on it. Every small farm. And but yeah, those ones are kind of the most important ones. Get a nice garden cart, haul tools around, make sure you're not making trips here and there and here and there, and
waste half your day just walking back to the tool shed.
Yeah, try not to overdo it and break your back carrying stuff up the hill for the 5th time that day. If you're harvesting stuff, get several bins, harvest all those bins, carry them up on a cart, because if you want to be doing this in 20 years, you're going to have to treat your body okay.
Yeah.
And you can really do a lot of damage to your back in the first 5 years that you're farming if you don't have those tools.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that.
Take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself.
You're your most valuable equipment or whatever, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah, especially if you're doing it, if you're the one who's out there bending over every day and harvesting and getting stuff done, making sure that your diet's good and you're not getting sick on a regular basis, and doing other exercises to keep yourself in shape makes a huge difference. Otherwise,
undo some of the yoga to do this, and then you can undo some of the crouching that you have to do all the time.
Yeah, or go for a run or lift weights to counteract.
Do something that's different. Balance your body out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's you really, it's worth investing in yourself as a piece of equipment on the farm, because you really are. That's the way you're going to farm. You got to take care of yourself just as good as any other farmer would take care of their tractor to keep it running. So, yeah. I'd say number one, go out and see if you like it. Don't start a farm from scratch without knowing, without having worked on a farm, being part of a farm in some way, doing the actual day-to-day work on a farm, because there's a lot of tedious stuff.
Yeah.
And you have to find value in that, and you got to know that you can do that from day in, day out. It's not this idealistic, everything is so abundant and I'm just plucking vegetables and fruit as I walk down this field of meadows. It's a lot of hard, thankless work that gets tedious, and sometimes you don't feel good and you got to do it anyway, and you have to really, really know that you like the work. So go out and get some experience and make sure you like it before you start your own farm. Get your hands dirty, see other people's operations, and then try to educate yourself on all the other aspects of running a business, on top of just knowing how to farm, know how to manage finances, know how to market stuff, know how to manage people if you're going to be managing people. There's so much to it and you got to be good at all of it.
Yeah. All these aspects beyond simply being a farmer on the farm.
Yeah, and it's, you can jump in, and if it turns out that you do love it, like what happened to me. I had some experience, but it really wasn't enough. But I really do love it, and I like the work, and I kind of worked my way through those years that I could have burnt myself out, and I did, but I didn't give up. But it's pretty easy to get overwhelmed and farmer burnout is a thing, especially in those first 5 years when you're getting your farm established and setting it up and making mistakes and getting your feet beneath you. And just be aware that you need to take care of yourself also. If you're going to want to keep doing this, it's got to be a valuable thing for you to do in your life. And in order to do that, a lot of times you need to step away and have a life and be a healthy person. So if it's getting in the way of that, then, just reduce the scale, do things to reduce that stress, step back a bit and keep yourself healthy before your farm. That's you can't have a healthy farm if you're not a healthy person, basically. That's what I found. Like if you're looking to farm in an urban, suburban environment, do the style farming that I do, that's kind of based in people's yards or private land or, multiple plots throughout a town or a city. It's not, there's a lot of drawbacks to doing it that way, and there's also a lot of advantages to doing it that way, but it's going to be a hard way to do it, just mostly because things aren't set up for you to do it that way. And be aware of that. Don't expect things to have been already set up for you. If you're going to do this, you're going to be somebody who's breaking pretty new ground, probably, in your community.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah. And be okay with that, and set expectations for everybody involved in the process, the landowners, your customers. Try to be as realistic as possible with people, and accept that a lot of times you're not going to know the right answer to something, and let other people know that too, and then do your best to figure out what to do in each situation, and just be a genuine, honest person with people. Keep those relationships positive, and hopefully you can make a go of it.
What would you say, maybe just a couple of the advantage or disadvantage from doing this patchwork?
Yeah, so disadvantages is kind of lack of consistency in terms of for me it's plot size, bed size, bed layout. There's things that I can do to minimize that inconsistency, but it's not a giant field that is an acre
and you
or
to draw
two,
the whole thing
and
out,
you just draw it out, you lay it out, it's done, and nobody else is involved, and it's just a vacant piece of land, and you run a tractor, and you know that this tractor's wheels are this far apart, and you go, and that's not what I encounter working in people's yards that have trees and buildings and sometimes rocks and good soil and bad soil and shade and sun. There's just a lot of extra things to account for, and not everything can be quite as uniform. But that said, you're also closer to a lot of resources. I can go to the hardware store and this store and that store and this to get all the stuff that I need to do this farming, and it's all right here within a mile of my house, and I am closer to the places that I deliver the produce to, and I have customers that all eat food right around me. I don't have to fill up a semi-truck and ship it to wherever. It's just I can sell this stuff because there's people here who need this that I'm growing, and I just need to make those connections. I can get compost easily. I can get city water at any property I have that's already filtered, that is just there. I can count on it.
Consistent pressure.
Yeah.
It's just plumbed, and all I do is just
Yeah,
connect,
it's clean and
hose bib, and go.
yeah, I just have to worry about when it's gonna freeze, and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you know, I don't have to worry about how much snow did we get up in the mountains this year. Some years I do in Colorado, but you know, for the most part, I know that there's water there, and I can use it, and I can count on that. There's more people if you have volunteers or part-time workers. You're not struggling to find people like in a rural area. You know, you have a lot of migrant labor, and you have a lot of, you know, people who have work visas that are from other countries that come in, and that's their labor force that they rely on every year. But as we've seen, you know, politics can really change that up and affect your whole labor force. I have more access to a labor force here if I want it, and more access to volunteers if I want them. You can actually build those relationships and have them be a part of your life, and that's valuable in and of itself. So, you know, there's a lot of advantages to being an urban or, you know, farming in a more populated area. But yeah, it's different. You don't have a huge piece of land in general. You're patchworking stuff together. Things aren't necessarily this layout consistently through all your plots. You can find ways to make those things less of an issue, but they're probably always going to be there. And, you know, but you can either look at them as a burden, or you can see that as variety, and that's fun. That's keeping you interested, and you know, a lot of it just depends on your attitude.